Hey you guys, this is Jess with Sourceful Journey, back with another video. So I wanted to actually talk about the topic of witchcraft and its connections in reference to the church. You heard me. So without further ado, we're going to go into some details here about some information I came across, and I'm just really going to share my thoughts about it. And if in fact there could be a connection there. So yeah, let's go ahead and just hop right in. Witchcraft is a very, very interesting topic, especially because there is so multifaceted, so many different layers, so many different types of witches and such that ties into the space. Now you have your dark and your light witches and all that. I won't go into too much detail. There's so much on YouTube for it, but if you do your research, you'll learn a lot. But in reference to it being done in the church, that is an interesting thought. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially for some of us who grew up in the church. But is it possible that some of the actual acts that have been done within the church, is it something that is aligned with that of witchcraft? That is definitely something to reflect on, that's for sure. I saw a few videos online the other day where this young lady was discussing this. The name of the young lady, her name is Jenny Weaver Worships on YouTube. She brought up some very valid points, I would say, in reference to some examples. I think from what I understand, she came from a Pentecostal church, and she mentioned quite a few things that were very similar to what some of us may have experienced in other church settings. For instance, I came from more of an evangelical Baptist church. So a lot of the things she mentioned as far as like the motherboard of the church, how on Sundays they will wear all white, and how they would sit in a separate area from the rest of the congregation, if you will. When she mentioned certain things that the churches would do when it comes to the choir marching down the aisle, things of that nature, or when it came to, I guess you could say, like a praise session. Very similar to that of like a evangelical Baptist church, or just a Baptist church in general. And it was interesting because as I'm hearing her examples, I'm like, wow, I do recall seeing that as a kid coming up and didn't think anything bad of it. Or when some would begin, been seeing helicopters like crazy. When some would begin like speaking in tongues, or, falling out because they're feeling the spirit, or, if one would react in a certain way when like a certain angel may have entered one of the mothers on the board, that whole presentation of that too. I thought it was like pretty intriguing. I mean, again, as a kid, you don't know what you're looking at exactly. You're just like, wow, I've never seen this before. It's very interesting, to say the least. There's other things that I think about too in terms of the church that in reality does connect to witchcraft. 212, as I'm saying this. The altars, you see an altar in a church, and oftentimes I remember growing up as a kid, in our household we had an altar. You have an altar, then you have like the Bible there, like a huge Bible right front and center on the altar. But then you have like little treats, like little candies and things on the altar as well. And then a picture of any passed on loved ones. In my household, it was my late grandmother at the time that was on our altar. And then of course, you have candles, things like that, the candles too. What else? Oh, I do recall also whenever there was like a certain issue we were dealing with, a certain prayer that we prayed in terms of wanting to remove a certain something, out of the way. Like maybe if we were dealing with people who were bullying us, as an example, or whatever the case may be, or maybe there was we were praying for certain debt to be cleared. I'm just making up random examples I could think of. one thing I do recall is that we were conditioned that, you know, you should write your prayer out too. You can, of course, say your prayer aloud and say it within. You can also do it in those other avenues as well. But one way I remember my mind used to always encourage us to do is to write our prayers out. And we would write it out and put it into the Bible and leave it there and just trust in God, knowing that it's done. That too was another thing. And it actually worked. It worked. So I say all this to say, I truly do feel when it comes down to the notion of whether or not there is a correlation with witchcraft in reference to the church. As tough as a pill as it may be for a lot of us to swallow, especially a lot of us who came up in the church, it may not really be closely aligned with it now because of all that's been revealed as of, I guess you could say as of recent. I was going to say as of late, but I was just trying to decide on which one. But as of recent, over the past few years, I still would say that, in my opinion, I honestly think there is a correlation there. Now, I think it goes a lot deeper too, because when you think about witchcraft and what type of, where it came from in terms of locations and cultures, things like that, I think, you know, that has a lot to do with it too. So I really think when it comes to how it's applied, if it's applied with, I don't know. I think if it's applied with good intention versus bad, that's another thing to take into consideration too. Sometimes we can get so wrapped up in terms of the wording and we automatically think by default, oh, that's evil, that's bad. You know, and part of it's just because it's human nature. If it's something we don't understand or understand where it came from and why, we tend to write it off as not of God. But, you know, the reality of it all is that even when it comes down to other various religions, the other side may feel like, oh, your religion's not of God either. Or your religion's not even real. Yours came after that of this particular group. You know, think about it. Even when it comes to Christianity, a lot of people would make the argument that, well, you know, Christianity was something that came much later compared to other religions that have been around for quite some time. So some people might write it off as a copycat compared to a lot of beliefs that came from the, just came from more of the African diaspora, from you know, Egypt as an example, right? So when you think about the whole thing with Easter, or let's talk about the whole thing with Christmas. Christmas is a huge, huge topic, especially on YouTube. As far as what its true meaning is, you know, some jokingly would think, oh, it's Santa Claus, you know, all that. And then others like, no, this is pertains to Christ. You know, the fact that Christ was, you know, Christ is born. It's a celebration in terms of that. Then some would say it's something else, more so dealing with the Christos. If you know, you know. So again, I guess it really all boils down to perception and really just doing research, to be quite honest. I'll tell you for sure, and in my opinion, I'm an avid believer of taking time out and doing research. And I can tell you a lot of the things that I felt was of the light was completely not altogether. Without making this video too long, I would just say that, you know, at the end of the day, it's truly all about perception, and one should truly just do their research when it comes to these various areas. You know, I really think that in reference to that whole notion of whether there is a correlation with, you know, witchcraft, and when it comes to the church, again, going back to Jenny Weaver worships examples and thinking back to my own experiences I've noticed within the church setting I grew up in, as well as what was done at home, I think there is some truth behind it. Some truth behind it that I didn't notice early on. But as I got older, I started to do more of a comparative analysis of those spaces. I started to see a connection there. And there has to be a reason why it is. As far as whether it could be a good or bad thing, it falls on the individual. It truly is all about perception and how one chooses to apply those things. It's kind of like saying you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think there's some truth to that, but I think, you know, if you truly want to change or to deviate from that space, that conditioning of how you were brought up within the church setting and partaking in certain acts such as what was mentioned earlier in my video, you have to want to do it within self and proceed accordingly. But yeah, that's truly it. That's truly my thoughts on this all together. What are you guys' thoughts about that? Do you feel that there is a connection in terms of what is done within the church that aligns with that of witchcraft? Do you think that there is some truth behind it? And think of some times where you've noticed certain things that were done within your home space that were examples of that. Be interested to hear you guys' thoughts. You know, definitely leave your comments in the comment section below, or send me your responses as always, as you have been on the other social media platforms. Email is just as good. At the moment, as far as consultations, I do have 3 more spots available for this week. So definitely, if it is something that is of interest to you, take advantage of it. But yeah, I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts about it and share your stories of when you realize that there may be just a correlation in reference to these 2 spaces. We'd love to hear from you guys. So as always, I'm definitely sending you with love and light, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, you guys.